I'm going to read a small essay of sorts, and it's called Why I Am a Reggae Poet, Poetry and Human Rights. And hopefully it will, I don't have to say a great deal more about it, but I hope it will generate some useful discussion amongst us. Often, when I declare myself a reggae poet, which I do a lot, people expect me to produce poems that are full of rhythm and that evoke sun and sea and the superficial ethos of reggae. But reggae is far more than that. And my hope is to use the example of the best-known reggae artist. Who would that be? It's interactive, thank you. To tell us something about what motivates me as a writer and the standard that I have taken on as my own in my work. I was asked some time ago to talk about Bob Marley's songs in terms of human rights. It turns out that as I began to contemplate these things, I was slowly arriving at a sense of how I see a path for an artist to be at once an activist, engaged with the politics of the world, engaged with humanity, and yet be wholly an artist concerned about art, about craft, and about the beauty and power of language. I should note that in an interview, Bob Marley refers to his music as an exploration of the beauties. He says the beauties is the word that he used. If one were to ask which of Bob Marley's songs spoke directly to the issue of human rights, chances are that most people would offer Get Up, Stand Up. Apart from the lure of the word right in the song, there is something alarmingly appealing about the call, Get Up, Stand Up for Your Rights. As anthems go, it is not a bad one. He rails against oppressive religion, myths of society, and the most positive spin we can give to this song as a political song is that it conflates political oppression with the religious oppression of Western Christianity. Some would argue that this was really a Peter Tosh song. And the fact that Bob Marley often softened the rail against Jesus in later performances speaks to his awareness of the core religious intent of the song and his discomfort with at least that part of it. In the original version, there's a bridge, and the bridge reads, or goes, sick and tired of your ism schism, can die and go to heaven in Jesus' name. We know and we understand Almighty God is a living man. Marley, when he would perform it without the rest of the Wailers, would sing, sick and tired of your ism schism, die and go to heaven in a ism schism. We know and we understand Almighty God is a living man. Get Up, Stand Up is essentially an apologetic for Rastafarianism, and it presents a philosophy of existence that is rooted in the core Rasta belief that Haile Selassie is the returned Messiah come to rule on earth. Hence, the quest for pie in the sky dreams posed by Christianity, which was one step behind in prophecy, at least according to Rastas, amounted to succumbing to a lie, a destructive lie. And what I mean by the one step behind is, in these Judeo-Christian belief systems, and Rasta is one of those, in Judaism, the belief is the Messiah is yet to come. Christianity, the belief is the Messiah has come, he's gone, he'll soon be back. Rastas believe the Messiah came, he went, and came back in the form of Haile Selassie. For all its force and popularity, Get Up, Stand Up pales before some of the more compelling Marley songs that dealt most directly and unabashedly with the issue of human rights. One would have to go to some of his later work to find such songs like War, Babylon System, and of course, Zimbabwe. One of his most outspoken expressions of political thought that was rooted in a specific moment, a particular political reality, and a very specific oppressive system that dehumanized the whole race of people because of their race. Now, in his song War, Marley essentially turns to a speech by Haile Selassie, a speech for human rights, the human rights of Africans, and he uses that to offer what would have then been his most directly political song. This was in about 1977. Until there is no longer first class or second class citizen of any nation. Until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes. And until the basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race. This is war. War takes things a step further than Selassie's speech did. Marley adds the declaration, war. Or more explicitly, until these things are in place, there will be war. And here he's carrying out the two functions, or the two possible functions of prophecy. On one hand, diagnosing through observation of a reality, if you will, a situation that and saying what will happen in the future if the situation continues, and at the same time calling the world to war against oppression. That is a call for action. Selassie was talking specifically about Southern Africa, Rhodesia, and South Africa, Mozambique. And Marley embraced this vision and found in the song a poignant and beautiful lyric that moved all of us who heard it. He turned it into this great song, this beautiful song, Everywhere is War. But for me, Marley's most interesting and pressingly relevant song about human rights remains Zimbabwe. Bob Marley quotes Garvey in the opening line in his anthem for human rights. Zimbabwe, and then he finds an eloquent rhyme for that line. So the line by Marcus Garvey, every man has a right to decide his own destiny. Because in this judgment, there is no partiality. That's the Marley rejoinder. So arm in arm with arms, we'll fight this little struggle. Because that's the only way we can overcome a little trouble. Brother, you're right, you're right, you're right, so right. We've got to fight. We're gonna fight. We've got to fight for our rights. Natty dreaded in a Zimbabwe. It's great play on language where he plays with rights, the correct right, ritual rights, and so on, all the way through. And I love so arm in arm with arms. That's good stuff right there. Arm in arm with arms. We'll fight this little struggle, which is that hyperbole, that the bathos of it is just a little thing that we're fighting. In this tightly wrought and clever lyric, I find so much that speaks to how the manner of human rights comes to me. The truth is that I never sit down and think every day about whether people have human rights or not, and what can be done for those who do not have those human rights. I have read many charters, and the Charter of the United Nations declaring our right to certain dignities like what is essentially the US Charter of Rights, which speaks without irony of the inalienable rights of man at a time when even those who penned the charter were depriving whole groups of humans of these rights. there was no irony, but there was awareness that there was something contradictory about the constitutional laws that were being put in place at the time in this country. They debated what to do with black people, for instance. It turned out badly for black people at the end of the debate, but at least they debated it. These charters do impress me, but I do not know them by heart, and I realize that when I think of the matter of human rights, I'm finding myself lamenting, complaining, regretting, and praying for people. And by this I mean that even though I have spoken of several Bob Marley songs that are about human rights and that are declared human rights songs, the truth is that virtually all of Bob Marley's songs, with the exception of only a few of his love songs, are human rights songs, at least in the way that the question of human rights comes to me or has value for me. So when he tells his woman in the government yard in Trenchtown that everything is going to be all right, he is praying, hoping, appealing, and asserting his right to hope for better, to hope for a better day for himself and his woman who he loves. This is a love song rooted in the assumption that the suffering of hunger is wrong and should not continue. It's a great love song that never says love, but it's an articulation. And by the way, I always like to do this because it's my public service to the world. No woman, no cry does not mean if you don't have a woman, you won't cry. That's not what it means. Okay, and I know this has come as a disappointment to a number of people in here right now, because I'm sure there are some of you who have told your girlfriends or your ex-girlfriends, yeah, well, you know, as Bob Marley says, no woman, no cry, so you can leave. That's not what it means. It means no woman, do not cry. It's a double appeal. Please, woman, don't cry. Disappointing. But the flip side of it is, what a great gesture, what a great expression of affection and love. So for the new girlfriend, you can use that. When he declares in Soja Se, which is Soja says, as God says, not one of my sheep shall sit in the sidewalk and beg bread. He is reaching for the words of God to assert that the right of the Creator, he and his people must not have to beg for bread or to live in a park. I don't want to live in the park, can't take the shadows of the dark. To live in a park, to be afraid of the shadows of the dark. And when he quotes they in Trenchtown, who ask, can anything good come out of Trenchtown? The rhetorical answer is yes. But that yes is defined by an assertion of the right of the ghetto dwellers to have a better life, to be able to create and to be able to free the people with music. And when a passerby tries to explain to a woman why her son has been shot down in the street and died just because of the system in Johnny was, that person is living as a human being in this world, but trying to grapple with a basic human right, the right to safety, the right to justice, to a woman who clearly has seen no safety and justice. And by this I mean, I am like the passerby so often in my life. When I put a microphone in front of men and women living with HIV/AIDS, and I ask them how they are doing, and I ask them whether they are getting enough food, and I ask them whether they have fear in their lives. And when they tell me of the hardships of their lives, and when they tell me of the things they have to live in this world without, my lament, my effort to write stories and articles, and ultimately the poems that I write, speak to these things. It is the same impulse, a basic impulse. When I put a mic in front of African American women, 70, 80 years old, in Sumter, South Carolina, and I asked them to tell me what it was like to grow up black in Jim Crow, South Carolina. Or when I asked them, when did you first know you were black? And they, to a person, can tell me the day, the moment, and the occasion. And when I have to run to my room at night and write poems about it, it is the same impulse, a basic human impulse, and it's the same impulse that I see in Marley's songs. We become human rights advocates when we understand that our ability to write stories, write poems, and write songs out of a strong ethical place of empathy and out of a sense of the injustices and suffering that people experience around us every day, that we experience, we are indeed engaging in the struggle for those rights. I'm saying that while there is value in writing those anthems of human rights, the ones that call us to get up and stand up for our rights, the truth is that our capacity to simply be witnesses to the tellers of these narratives that fill us with sorrow and puzzlement and wonder and fear and anger amounts to a profound act of defiance and resistance. That we speak it is an act of resistance, and our capacity to sing songs of hope in the midst of the truth-telling, one love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. There in the midst of a song about the end of all things, a song that says, there is one question that I really love to ask. Is there a place for the hopeless sinner who has hurt all mankind just to save his own? Believe me, one love, one heart. Still, despite it all, and perhaps because of it all, let's get together and feel all right. And when our art gives dignity to even the most downtrodden of people, but showing us their round and glorious humanity, that act, that willful inclusion of them in the imagination, in the imaginative universe of value, constitutes a profoundly important human rights declaration. It is in this way that I believe Bob Marley was most articulate as a human rights advocate. It was in his songs of empathy, praise, and the capacity to dance and worship Jah, and the capacity to sing in faith about his God, even at a time of most dire predicament and woe. The ability to laugh at himself, the ability to sing, if Jah didn't love I, would I be alive today? Would I be around to say, give thanks and praises? It is in all of that that we find him most forcefully a human rights champion. So yes, Get Up, Stand Up is a song of human rights, but equally remarkable is his song Trench Town Rock when he sings, we groove in Kingston 12. In other words, here in Kingston 12, in this ghetto, we're still grooving. We're here. We're not going anywhere. Or when he wails, you're gonna lively up yourself and don't be no drag. He is asserting that the right of the ordinary sufferer to sing, to dance, to be lively, and to live, or in jump, 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 naya binge, when he sings joyfully, good to see when you move to the rhythm. Well, I like to see you when you're dancing from within. It gives great joy to see such sweet togetherness. Everyone's grooving and they're doing their best. He is filled with the hope of the right of everyone to be joyful in our togetherness, even in the midst of squalor. Implicit in the lamentation for those who have been deprived of human rights is the hope in the vision of seeing people living lives that will make us never have to think about human rights again. I like to think that this is what our artists are about. We are about somehow reminding ourselves as societies of the beauty of our shared humanity and our capacity to live without fear of the loss of this dignity. Our world is a mess right now. The assault on the rights of human beings assails our senses, whether it is in those living in war zones, those women under the tyranny of abusive men, that 17-year-old boy shot by a vigilante in his own neighborhood only because he was black, and so on and so forth. And yet, by writing into being the full and rich and varied range of the lives of the people we see each day, we may be doing something wonderful about challenging these systems that are trying to withhold the human rights of so many millions of people. And this is why I say I am a reggae poet. This is why I say I owe much of how I see the world and how I live and work as an artist to what I have learned from Bob Marley. I can think of no better introduction or explanation for my poetry, therefore, than what I have said about Bob Marley. He constitutes a high bar for me, a standard, a kind of pressure to change the metaphor, to strive for something excellent, but above all, something lasting, urgent, and ultimately necessary in the world. So maybe I'm not a human rights activist. Those terms are too lofty for me. But I am passionate about human life, about the way we live in this world and how we find joy in this world. I'm passionate about it. I'm curious about it. I'm inquisitive about it. And as I write, I am discovering things about human life that I probably know but do not know that I know until I write them down. My art, I hope, fills us with possibility and hope, even as the work delights and moves us. My work seeks to find illumination in the midst of darkness, hardship, and difficulty. I write about tough things, but in the way the blues, I think, manages to achieve, for all that we might say about the blues being lamentation and woe, we dance to the blues, we rock to the blues, we nod to the blues, we are enlivened by the blues. Somehow, a wonderful alchemy takes place when art touches suffering and creates something that I can only call illumination. Okay. Now, it's time to read some poems. So, when I was in South Africa some months ago, well, maybe a couple years ago. This is the first time I was using my iPad to do a reading, and it only happened that I was billed, to perform. This was in where was I? Cape Town. It was Cape Town, right? So I was billed to perform with what turned out to be performance artists, like poets who knew their stuff by heart. Very annoying people, I find. You know what I mean? It's very annoying. They come and they just and then everybody's so impressed with them because they remembered, It's like, You don't even listen to the poem. Anybody can do that. Well, not anybody. I can't, but I mean, they can. So what? That's not like an accomplishment. You know, it's like a baby gets up and starts to walk. Wow! Well, that's going to happen. Most of the time, baby's going to walk. I mean, it's not that remarkable. But anyway, I distracted myself there by that painful rant. Anyway, so this was the thing. They had the lights and everything. The lights were perfect, but I could not see to read. So I said to them, I said, can we like change the lights and so on? And you know, they really were helpful. They tried, and it messed up the whole light show. And I looked at it, this was in rehearsal, and I just thought, it's bad enough that I don't know my lines by heart, like the rest of these dancers and like poets who do jigs and so on and so forth on stage. Then I'm gonna come and mess up the whole light show. So I said, you know what, it's okay. I went back, I said, I'm going back to my room. I said, I don't know what I'll do. I know a couple of songs, like by heart, so I'll do some songs, like their poems, you know. And I was very depressed. So I get to my room and I get on my iPad, which was spanking new, and I thought, iPad, backlit. I can read from my iPad. This is like, it was like a revelation. It's just like a kid walking. It was like, it hit me. Remarkable. So I did the thing, you know, I transferred and I put everything in my iPad and, you know, and I went on stage and I read with my iPad, and I was actually a little more impressive than those people who knew their words by heart, because I was walking around with a handful of light. I lit myself. It was beautiful. So here's the problem, though, because, you know, in this day and age, you cannot do, like right now, people probably are tweeting this conversation that I'm having with you, which is a private conversation, and I didn't give anybody permission to put this out to the world. So in case you're doing that, don't. Again, I distract myself. So in the manner of those things, I get back to my hotel room. This is in the lovely Cape Town, and I go online to check my mail, and there it is on some tweet or something comes up, and comments about the reading have already arrived. This is like half an hour later. First comment was, and to read, this person just went, this guy, had to be a guy, he just went on about what kind of guy is this guy reading poetry from an iPad? Doesn't he know that books are threatened, and he's just such a show-off, and he's just like blue, 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 blue. And I just thought, you're just jealous. You don't have an iPad. You want one. You don't have one. All right, get a job. You know, I was just mean about it. So anyway, I went to the next one because obviously a lot of people had commented on my reading. And I started reading this one, and my heart melted. A young lady, I assume she was young, given the content of her comment, said, I thought it was so cool that he was reading from this iPad, and it was such a great reading. It was just dynamic, and anyway, I don't know why people are getting on like that. It's just so great to see an old guy using like modern technology. And I thought, wow, I don't know. Should I feel good here? Because I have not agreed that I'm old yet. This was before I was 50. I didn't reach that agreement. I mean, generally speaking, before I'm 50, I assumed that I was still, well, you know, young, like relatively. I mean, not old enough to be called old. So, in case you're thinking that this old guy looks hip using an iPad right now, it's true. I am an old guy because I'm over 50 and I'm using a damn iPad, so be impressed. I'm not only using an iPad, I'm also using an iPhone. I have an iPhone and an iPad on stage together in my reading. That's how cool I am. Thank you. That was by way of introduction to this wonderful reading that I'm about to do. And if it sucks, at least you'll have a story to tell somebody. Okay. I'll read some poems from Wheels and maybe one or two new poems, if I get a chance to. Our colossal father again. Sub, heavy world, sub as you spin. W.H. Auden. The portrait painter's art works like faith that turns the wafer, the decanter of wine, into something else. A dragon swaggers through the portal of our century, striding into a Gothic sky. In another room, in another country, olive groves and gleaming mosques are pulverized to dust. Outside, the white courtyards, bloody streets fade after sudden explosions. He is a throwback to grand lawgivers who stretched their arms over the world. We will remember him for his Augustinian self-denial, the last beer he drank, and his mealy-mouthed sermons. His prophets pour oil that rises in flood across the marbled floor. Better a good name than costly oil, the day of death than the day of birth. In the faint light of dusk, he seems to be walking on water. It's a poem for George Bush. Those were really difficult times. These poems were written just around the time when we were dealing with wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, wars around the world. This poem is called Rituals Before the Poem. In terror, they will drink water grudgingly, Ezekiel chapter 4. Before the poem comes like a word from a brazen sky, the poet must lie on his side for a year, eating only dry bread and measured bowls of water. The poet must pour sand over grass and build the walls of his city. The poet must surround the walls with offense of guns and for days upon days starve the city of all its music. The poet's tongue will grow heavy and his limbs will be bound with cords so he cannot move. He will quarrel with God about the meaning of poetry. The poet will beg for mercy, lying on his other side for 190 days, his body scarred with the wounds he inflicts on his family. All this a poet does before a poem so that when he walks out in midwinter, his face will be smooth, his eyes will have the quiet resignation we call peace, and his satchel will be full of whimsical lyrics about the color green and the sounds a whore makes in her dreams. I lived in South Carolina for about 19 years. Those were very formative times for me in many ways because I owe South Carolina much for the work that I've written. At least 6 of my poems would not have been possible without me living in South Carolina. It's a complicated place, but it's a place that I still regard as one of the most African of states in this country, probably the most African if you consider the Sea Island people, the Gullah people. This poem is called How to Pick a Hanging Tree. It is based on a trip that I took, a visit that I took to, one of the many visits I took to one of the old plantations. The problem with these plantations is that they are now used for photo shoots for weddings. People get married and they want to take pictures by the plantation. You can blame Gone with the Wind for this problem. And I went on a tour and I kept asking them, where are the slave quarters, you know? And they kept saying, well, that's not really part of the tour. And I kept asking, and I think I was annoying them. So they asked me to leave and go to the main office. And I swear they must have applauded when I finally left because it was just messing up the whole, you know, Southern romantic thing. So I went to the office and they took me around and they showed me the slave quarters. Apparently they didn't want to put that on the tour. A little messy for these kinds of tours. After all, these plantations where they're taking pictures are actually concentration camps. That's what they are. And maybe that's how we should treat them. When I was on the second tour, they finally showed me, they took me to just by a waterside and they said, this tree. And I said, that's a grand old live oak tree. And they said, yeah, this is a tree they call the hanging tree. How to pick a hanging tree. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolias, sweet and fresh, then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Lewis Allen. Young trees may look sturdy, but they have no memory. They are green, so near the surface, they bend with a sudden weight. And the truth is that not all trees can carry a man's dead weight with enough air between pointed toes and earth, with enough height so the scent of rotting can carry far enough to be a message for those who are sniffing the muggy air for news. Old as it may look, craggy bark, twisted branches, drooping limbs, old as it may seem, sitting there by the edge of the canal, that live oak understands the simple rituals of hanging. See, there is the natural notch where the rope will slip and hold, and here, angled like this, the damp air off the river carries the decay for miles and miles. Sometimes a fresh tree will simply die after the piss of a dying man seeps into its roots. Sometimes a tree will start to rot from guilt or something like a curse. But the old trees, seasoned by the flame of summer lightning and hardened to tears, knows it's nothing to be a tree, mute and heartless, just strong enough to carry a man until he turns to air. I did some work for the BBC a few years ago. They asked me to tell the story of Haile Selassie, his years in exile in Bath, England, just around the time of the Second World War. And then his return back to Ethiopia triumphantly to rout the Italians. So on that trip, I went to England, and of course, I went to Ethiopia, and I visited a place called Sheshemani, which is a piece of land ceded to anyone who was of the African diaspora who wanted to go to Africa and live there. And Haile Selassie left this land for people with a few, few rules and so on and so forth, but many people took it up, and especially the Rastafarians, whose belief system at the heart of it, repatriation to Africa, is almost a tenet of the faith. So I visited a Jamaican community there, and I met this man called Solomon Ephraim Wolf. And so this poem is about my meeting with him and the ways that memory, life, culture, and faith intersect. It's called African Postman, from the Burning Spear song. Son, who is that? Is the African postman daddy? Burning Spear. East from Addis Ababa, and then south, deep into the Rift Valley. I can hear the horn trumpeting over the flat-roofed acacia trees. I see African women bend low with wood, heavy on their backs, and the cows, goats, donkeys, mules, sheep, and horses snapped into obedient herds by sprinting children moving along the roadside. Life happens here. I'm traveling to the land I have heard about, Sheshemani, the green place, 500 acres of jazz benevolence, and I know now that I long to hear the rootsman tell me how, despite rumors of his passing, the Natty keeps on riding, keeps on standing in the fields of praise to hold on to the faith of roots people. Brother Solomon, you put the name Ephraim on your head and carry the face of the true Rasta, the face of an Ashanti warrior, eyes deep under heavy lids and your skin tight as leather, blacker than black. I have met you before on the streets of Kingston, there where you trod to the hiss and slander of the heathen. You, Natty Dread, gathering the people's broken minds into your calabash. You carry it all. Tell them, return to the roots. The healing shall take place. You are burning spear's voice in the fields of Teph. You tell me of the prophecy of Marcus, and I listen to you through the phlegm, through the gruff of your voice. Then suddenly, when I ask about the passing of the emperor, you rise up like a staff of correction, your voice reaching back to the mountains, your warrior self, your yardman greatness, and you speak a mystery to those who have ears but won't hear, who have eyes and won't see. And I know that this dread will one day stand in this soil and find his feet growing roots, that soon the earth will be darker for the arrival of Solomon. Oh, let the heathen rage, let the doubters scoff, let this Ghanaian youth whose eyes have seen the face of Jesus Christ, let him too sit and marvel at the faith of the Natty, for this African postman has forsaken father and mother, has come to stand before his imperial majesty to call only him father, so that the father might call him son. And the world will carry on its weary march, and the ibises will swoop in the Ethiopian dusk, and the smoke will rise from wood fires, and the night will come with news that the rootsman, after 400 years of being told he is homeless, has come home. Yes, Jah has come home. Sons and daughters of his imperial majesty, Haile Selassie, earth rightful ruler, without any apology say, this is the time when I should come home. Yes, Jah, oh come and hold the fort. Now let go. Now let go. Now let go. Two poems. Make them two love poems. How about that? This is for some friends of mine in Haiti living with HIV. Gantier. I thought, he said, of the wife who lasted 6 months until the news of this treachery of the blood. Before he lay on his back, the bottles of toxic drugs and poison for rats lined up on his sill. Before the simple equation of fatigue with the world plus a body falling to ruin, a heart shattered by a woman's laughter, before she had left, that wife, the woman of beauty who knew her beauty, I thought, he said, she was an angel, but she wasn't, as sometimes happens. But now, he smiled that lazy trickster grin, his amber eyes sparkling. He has found his archangel, and this is how a cliche for a pop song becomes a hymn for saints. She came and saved him, the way archangels come into a room, not asking permission, walking in wingless as if they have an army of angels at their command, like the scent of incense filling your breath and anointing you, and you fall in line. This is bigger than love. A book, an apocryphal book with chapter and verse could be written about this thing, the voice of God commanding the mystery of celestial beings sacrificed as the mates of flesh, weak humans. She is this archangel with a wound in her body, as if the whole thing was planned. I will place a curse on you. Something haunting like leprosy would have been had they not found its cure. Something reserved for the damned, they say. They that think you must whisper whisper in the shadow of crannies where thin bodies lie sprawled out, straining for air. I will let her carry this disease, and then I will command you to marry her, take her as your wife, and you will learn how much bigger than desire this love is, how much wider than hunger. He looked at her, lying there on her stomach on the mattress covered in a white sheet out there on the porch where the air is cooler, dressed in her pink church skirt suit, looking at him, having fed him, given him water to drink, poured water for his hands, and he said, I do not deserve her. Her name should be Grace. I do not deserve this shelter. And I ask her all the time, why do you love me? And she says, it's bigger than me and you. And that is all she says. Maybe a man must always wait to touch the flesh of an archangel. A man must come to the body of an archangel as to an altar. A man must not let the light in her eyes fool him into thinking this is ordinary flesh. A man must wait to marry her properly, give her a ring, give her the laughter of a family gathered. A man must do all these things before he falls prostrate before the body of an archangel who does not even know she is divine, except in the way a vessel knows it is set aside for pure water. Love is desperate like this for those who have come away from the cataclysm of dust and stone, those who have come to know the ending of things, those who live as if tomorrow is not promised. This is how love is for those cursed with the love of archangels. So, last poem. I think I'll do a poem which is a fairly new poem called If You Know Her. So it's, well, if you know her. It's really to a guy or to guys or gals. You'll see in the context. If you know her. If you know your woman, know her rhythms, know her ways. If you're paying attention to her all these years, you will know how she comes and goes, how she slips away even though she's standing in the same place. And you will know that her world is drifting softly from you, and she may not mean it, because all it is she's scared to be everything, scared to be finding herself in you every time. Scared that one day she will ask herself, all 40 plenty years of her, where she's been. If you know your woman, you will know that mostly she will come back, but sometimes when she drifts like this, something can make her slip, and then coming back is hard. If you know your woman, you can tell by the way she puts on heels, and she does not sashay for you because it's not about you. How she will buy some leather boots and not say a word about it. And you only see it when she walks in one night and she says, she's had them forever. And you will see the way she loses the weight and pretend it's nothing. But when she isn't seeing you looking, you can see how she faces the mirror, lifts her chest to catch a profile, and how she casually looks at her ass for signs of life. If you know your woman, when you are gone, she will find things to do, like walk alone, go see a movie, find a park, collect her secrets, and you won't know because she's looking for herself. And she won't tell you that she wants to hear what idle men say when she walks past them, because what you say is not enough. If you know your woman, you know when she's going away, and you will feel the big hole of your love, and you can't tell why she's listening and humming to tunes you did not even know she heard before, and she will laugh softly at nothing at all. If you know your woman, you will see how she comes and goes, and all you can do is wait and pray she will come back to you. Because you know that your sins are enough for her to leave and not return. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so we can do the Q&A now, right? I don't know if there's anybody running lights or something. I can barely see you, but if not, just sort of shout. There's a question here, yes?
What's in the Jamaican water that makes Jamaica so special?
What's in the Jamaican water that makes Jamaica so special?
In so many ways.
Okay, I'll assume that's just a metaphorical question. Because it's hard to tell. I mean, I think the Caribbean in general, like most societies that have had to invent themselves through out of the pressure of real challenge and difficulty, and have had to find inventive ways to preserve their humanity and dignity and humor and laughter. I think they develop resources. And those resources are at once beautiful and transformative and positive and powerful, but they can be at the same time, in the split, become very negative and volatile at the same time, but they are sources of survival. And I think that's at the heart of it. What many people don't realize is Jamaica, during the slavery period in Jamaica, which ended in 1838, the Jamaican system was one of the most pernicious. This is something that Orlando Patterson has done in studying all slavery history from the Romans right up. It was one of the most pernicious slavery systems because they made a very important choice. Those people who run slavery in that society. The choice was between having slaves, whether it was cost effective to try and keep slaves for a long period, keep them alive for a long period and to reproduce slaves, or to import them freshly, right? And the choice was made to work, there was a non-stop flow of new slaves that you could get. So consequently, you could work these slaves to death. There was no value in protecting them and keeping them alive. And you can imagine what the implications of that would be. America was very different. America's slave system, once the Americans, because the numbers were not as great, they decided that the best way to retain the system of slavery was that slaves reproduce themselves. And so it made sense to treat a pregnant woman well. There was value in a pregnant slave. This was not the case in Jamaica. So consequently, the resistance and the desire for survival and the toughness that has emerged has both this wonderful inventiveness and this incredible capacity for violence. And those two things make Jamaica what it is, a very complicated, beautiful, and sometimes very difficult place. And it makes us unpredictable. So don't mess with us. Forget that part. That was just a joke. We love everybody. We love you. All right. Other questions? Yes. Is there a hand back there? Yes, go ahead.
After that answer, I'm not sure if this is going to sound important at all, but your choice in the earlier poems, Wheels poems, of epigrams, and then I noticed in the newer poems you had not used. Is there what is your interest in these other traditions that you're quoting, or formally, what's your interest in adding that and then sort of not doing it anymore?
It's really kind of peculiar. I find epigrams are like, when I write poems, epigrams are, like I'm about to send them out somewhere. It's like my kids, I tell them, you gotta wear clothes, don't go naked. So that's basic, right? That's, put on some clothes, really. So that's basic. So that's the poem. And then I look at them and I say, you look good, hey, try this tie, or you wanna put on this coat, it'll make you look really cute. That's the epigram. The epigraph is the thing that tops the thing, but also gives us another way to find resonance and connections. It's also an homage to the traditions that I've learned from, and some of them I'm arguing with, you know. And so you'll see that, I drew from the strange fruit, which is part of a tradition that I feel this poem speaks to. I quote Auden, who is somebody that I quarrel with. And in a way, the fascism that is implicit in the poem is a way to reference that. The new poem that I didn't use an epigraph for, that's because she hasn't gone out yet. I may or may not use an epigraph. So an epigraph becomes an added dimension, gives another dimension to the poems. So it's a good question. And like I said, you'll see that throughout all my work, I will sometimes use an epigraph and sometimes not. And that's just because sometimes the epigraph is inside the poem itself, so I don't need to put it at the beginning of the poem. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Good. Yeah. Question, somebody? Yes.
So, a lot of the subject matter that I deal with incorporates a lot of physical suffering. Physical in this, it's tied very closely to the physical world, even so much as going to decay at like the cellular level. So I mean, it's very real and physical. Yet at the same time, throughout all that, there's this, I'm reluctant to say hope.
No, don't be reluctant, yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about how this connection between something that's so intangible and something that's so rooted in reality are tied together?
I should just get you to do the talking. I mean, that's really well put. Good question. And I think it can, a couple of things. One will sound like a facetious answer, but it's not, because it's a story. When I moved to Canada in 1986, I landed in Canada like in January 1986. This is not the best time to go to Canada, like January, right? And no lie, there was a blizzard. The plane landed in a blizzard, and I thought, that thing, and it happens to you in midwinter here if you're not from these northern climes. It's like, were we made to be living in this kind of thing? I mean, really? Like, it can't be, right? So anyway, this is what I was thinking. No. But for some reason, I decided that I was going to take on the winter, like really take it on, rather than shy away from it. For some reason, I thought this would be a good thing to do. So one day, it dropped to below 50 degrees. Okay, and most thinking people know that you stay indoors and stay warm. I mean, unless you have to go somewhere like your COP or something. Not me. I decided that I'm going to go walk 3 miles down to the river and walk back so that I can say I walked 6 miles in 50 degrees below temperature. And I did it. And it was stupid. Because it turns out that 50 below is like really cold. I mean, really, really, really cold. Stuff freezes on you, like everything freezes. It's just one of those things. Now, why do I say that? But it was my only way to say that I feel sometimes the need to challenge poetry and to challenge art by testing the limits of that art, testing the limits of language to speak to the unspeakable. Because I really believe that if I'm serious about my writing, then I should find the language to speak even the most unspeakable thing. And in a sense, it only makes sense, therefore, that my poetry will not shy away from the difficult. It may not succeed, but I'm going to make the effort to do so. But the other thing is, the act of making art is in and of itself a profoundly optimistic gesture. Just the very act of it. This is the example I like to use is the blues. Now, we know the blues, right? The blues is almost always about something really bad having happened. Woman left you, you broke, you know, the flood came, thousands died, singing the blues, right? So that's what the blues is about. Now we think so, the blues is all lamentation, but no, because here's the thing. If the blues were about pain, they would not sound like they sound. Because you see, if you're really, really, really hurting and in complete despair, I think the sound you're going to make is, ah! Not a song that rhymes. I don't think that has a form and a structure and a punchline and a repeat and rhythm. And I don't think that's immediate pain, if you understand what I mean. What it is it's taking art and taking this terror and turning it in, almost defying the terror by turning it into something beautiful. And even as we confront its ugliness in it, we discover that there's something beautiful about it. And in a real way, I do believe, whether it is a futile gesture, whether it is foolhardy, whether it's delusional, when I write, I believe I finally find at least some victory over what I find difficult. I'm looking for, as Bob Marley says, the beauties, because there's beauty in it somewhere. And I'm looking for that. So, even when it's really cold. Yes?
So you mentioned earlier,
You notice that this is all dudes who are asking questions. I'm so impressed by that. I have to say, this is really impressive. This is so unusual. Cheers, gentlemen. Yeah. Yeah. Good question. And I go a little further because I think to almost all of his love songs, at least the latter part of his love songs, have that. See, one of the things that Bob Marley's lyrics would do is that they always sort of root themselves in lived experience, right? So his early stuff in the 60s, he indulged in the sort of, pop fantasy kind of lyric and so on. So, but even his early, like I'm Hurting Inside. I mean, Lee Scratch Perry said when Bob Marley came and he sang that song. I think it was I'm Hurting Inside. He said he sang that as a kind of audition for Lee Scratch Perry, and he said this man is the real man because he's weeping in his song. And Lee Scratch Perry was saying he was weeping for the people, even though the song was this love song, right? So I think that even in his love songs, Marley doesn't fail to root his lyric in the lived experience of people. So that the love song, it's the same thing with people like Gregory Isaacs or Dennis Brown, who write these great love songs, but they are always about the working class man trying to find, the great reggae lyric is, money in my pocket, but I just can't find no love, right? This is it. Or financially, I'm a pauper, but when it comes to loving, I'm all right. That's the position, and you can see that. Some of the lyrics is, when you took your girl to the show, what did you give her? You gave her icy mint and ice water. That's a sweetie and ice water because this is all I got. That's all I got. That is a social commentary. That is even about the human experience in many ways. So when you hear a song like Stir It Up, which is just purely sexual, but at the same time, Stir It Up, what is the metaphor? The metaphor is not, I got a sunshine on a cloudy day when it's cool, I got the month of May. No, the metaphor is, your love is like the pot cooking outside. This is a pot outside, you know, I stir it up, you know, heat it, you know, when I put the wood in, then it heat up, which is the wood, you know, just the wood, like real wood that you put under the fire, then it heats up, right? But so he will use these metaphors. I mean, look at it. You know, when he says we'll be together with a roof right over our head, we'll share the shelter of what? Of my single bed. This is a dude. He only has a one. You know, it's a single bed, right? This is not romantic. We want a king size bed, right? And then the lyric goes on, we share the same room. Oh, Jah provide the bread. So it becomes a prayer and a question. So what I'm suggesting is there's a kind of honesty about the lived experience that one is still looking for hope in it. And I think that is what connects them. That's what makes you not think that, make you not comfortable with just separating them. So when you heard Bob Marley, if you've heard, everybody's heard the live version of No Woman, No Cry at the Rainbow Room in London, and you can hear the audience listening to it. This is early days, because remember the first version of it that everybody knew was the fast version, right? No woman, no cry, that one that just ching, chicka, ching, chicka, ching. And then Bob Marley live slows this down into a ballad, right? And you hear the audience, and what is the audience responding to? It's a love song, but he says, I remember when we used to sit in a government yard in Trenchtown, observing the hypocrites as they would mingle with the good people we meet, good friends we had, good friends we lost along the way. In this great future, you can't forget your past, so dry your tears, I say. No woman, no cry. Now that evokes such nostalgia for some of the people in there, but it affirms them. The second verse is, I remember when we used to sit in a government yard in Trenchtown and Georgie would make the fire. It was logwood burning through the night. Then we'll cook cornmeal porridge. Oh, cornmeal porridge is the most basic food in Jamaica. It's poor people's food. So we'll cook cornmeal porridge, half which I'll share with you. I'll give you a piece of my cornmeal porridge. And he says, in this great future, you can't forget your past, so dry your tears, I say. No woman, no cry. This is a love song. But it's clearly a song affirming the folk, affirming people's dignity in the midst of it, and hopeful in the midst of it. And so my theory, to end this answer, my theory is that we'll see that after Kaya, Bob Marley stopped writing love songs. After Kaya, there's no more love songs. But that's not true. Because every single one of his faith songs that he sings about Jah, in Survival, in Uprising, and in the last songs that he did in Confrontation, those became his love songs. It's the same structure, the same thing, but he refocuses it into these anthems to God. It's very fascinating, that thing that happens. And I find that a really fascinating dynamic. So for me, it's all of one. You know, it's all a kind of oneness about it. I do not see them as separated, when you think about it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Hey, clap the lady. Woo! All right, go ahead. Sorry. Ah.
I've been wondering, I know that you're a reggae singer, but have you written actual melodies and songs and poetry? And what do you think is a big difference between them? And I assume that you probably have performed songs.
Yes, yes.
And what do you enjoy doing more? Reading a lot? I mean, you obviously have an amazing stage presence already.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good questions. Okay, so to answer the sort of factual questions, I've written many songs and reggae songs and so on. My musical One Love, that was, in the West End in England, I did all the lyrics and the music. Then real musicians came and fixed it. But they were my melodies, man. Yeah, there's a kind of difference, and I've also set some of my poems to song, right? And in many ways, that's what I'm doing when I've written songs that the band played and so on. But there's a difference. I think the way that I treat song lyrics and poems is that they're all poems, that they're just different forms of poems, right? In the same way that I write a sonnet, there are certain expectations that come with a sonnet, both rhetorically and physically, in terms of rhyme scheme and meter and so on. And then there's a kind of form that a song lyric has, and there's a whole school of the ballad coming up to the to R&B, pop song, and all these kinds of things, the political song and so on. And so I'm very aware of these formal elements, and you know that what musicians want is largely they want a certain kind of predictability so that they can play around with it, right? They want some predictability. So you generally turn to, in writing song lyrics, you're looking to create lines that do not, you can hear a songwriter singing and you realize that this is not as well written a lyric because the line is just really too long for the melody, right? Some great singers can make it work, but you don't always get great singers to sing the songs. So you're thinking of rhythm, you're thinking of the space, you're thinking also of how people apprehend it. Because the interesting thing about songs is that people don't listen to songs just once, right? People read poems once and then they throw the book away. And you all need to stop doing that. Like, what's that about? Read the poem again. If you don't get it the first time, don't give up. You never know, like 20 years time, oh, that's what it meant. How many people, people used to listen to Bob Dylan. Oh, I love Bob Dylan. You didn't understand one thing he was saying, right? But you still loved him. Why? Not because of his voice, really, right? But enough is there to hold you. And then you go back, and you go back. And this is the great story about how, this is why I say when people say they don't like poetry, I say they're lying. They're lying. Because they give lyrics a chance that they don't want to give a poem the chance. And there's a history for that problem, but I won't go into that now. But what I'm saying is that we all have the capacity to understand it. So when I'm writing the song lyric, I'm aware of those dynamics versus when I'm writing a poem that I think people will encounter on the page. But I should say that's only in the editorial part of it. In the writing of the poem, I'm not thinking like that. In the writing of the poem, I'm just thinking, I've got to get this sound out in the right way. When I'm editing it and fixing it or deciding where it's going to go, then it's quite different. So if I took a poem of mine, I work with musicians who set my work to music, and they never take a whole poem and just set the whole poem to music. They just take 3-4 lines, or they'll take a line here, a line there, and then they'll put it together and create this thing. And I'm good with that. But that's because they're composing and they're working with what they have. Yeah. Yes?
So you were born on the continent, but raised in Jamaica, is that correct?
Yeah. The continent meaning Africa? Yeah. Because it's the continent, man. It's the only one. Yeah. I know. I'm just playing with you. I can mess with you a little bit. We're good, yeah. Yeah.
In terms of Bob Marley's music,
Yes.
his references to, Africa,
Yeah.
you being born on the continent,
Yeah.
Jamaica, just wondering how did his message and his lyrics play into your identity
It's a good question.
on the continent, raised in Jamaica?
Yeah.
And wondering, because, at least at a point, largely Bob Marley had a different popularity in the world than he did within Jamaica. So, just wondering, what's your perspective in terms of what Bob Marley did for the identity of Jamaica domestically, not in terms of what the world thought was Jamaica,
Sure.
reggae and ganja and dreadlocks.
Right.
I'm talking about within Jamaica. What would you say? Because I know Jamaica helped form his identity,
Mm-hmm.
and he helped form the identity of Jamaica. Just wondering, what's your notion, what's your take on the role he played on the identity of Jamaica?
Right. Yeah, so those are two good questions. So the first one is, Bob Marley I can speak of specifically, but I would say reggae music and what reggae music did and what reggae music, my engagement with it has been transformative, and what Rasta did. Because the truth is, when I went to Jamaica, it was not like, oh, welcome the African. That was not the vibe. The vibe was, who are these strange people coming to our good European country called Jamaica? Okay, Africans were not like, hi brother, we miss you. That was not the arrangement, okay? Right? Jamaicans in the I came into Jamaica in 1971. In 1971, the teasing, the harassment, the things my mother went through because she was African by Jamaicans, black Jamaicans, it is astounding. Right? So let's not be, and I always tell Jamaicans, yeah, you love me now, but don't even pretend that it was all that good. Because I remember you, people, you're all wearing froze now and you're wearing locks now, like you're all into it now. Yeah, but remember, right? So let's not forget that. So, but this is interesting because there's a class dynamic at work here, right? When I went to primary school, I remember I was in primary school in Jamaica, the kids harassed us until we had to find ways. So after a while, my sister and I, we started to create these stories, right? And we'd collude with each other before we got to school and say, okay, we've got pet lions, we've got, we met Tarzan, and so we go, we do all of that, the ghost who walked, the phantom. Guys don't know this stuff. Like the ghost who walks was the great phantom, this white man wearing like a Superman costume who used to run around Africa with pygmies, short people, and these were the people he ruled, and they bowed to the ghost who walked. This was a comic, like a syndicated comic, right? You don't know this. I'm telling you, man. So anyway, so we'd go to school and then they would say, hey, you're African. And I say, yeah, I'm African, so I'm to that. And they say, hey, you're comfortable, you wear shoes. I said, no, I don't like shoes, I don't like shoes. I said, most of the time I don't like to wear clothes. In fact, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now. And I'll start to strip, just to mess with them, you know what I'm saying? And then they'll say, I say, hey, we have a pet lion at home. You're too lie, you couldn't have a pet lion at home. I said, go and ask my sister, and of course. So your brother say, you have a pet lion at home? She said, yeah, I'm a tiger, and so. We can't come see it. Oh, it's very dangerous, So this humor was the only way we could deal with the implicit insults. I mean, nobody messed with me. I just jump on the table and go, and they run. They say, oh, African gone wild now, African gone wild. So they didn't even trouble me. Look at me, I couldn't harm a fly, but if you know, so, I'm not making any of this up. It's true. So the one set of people, and I won't lie, the one set of people, when I leave school, the guys used to sell, like the vendors, and they sell oranges and peanuts and so on. Rasta men used to sell there, and they said, you, African youth, come here, man. And I said, what? They said, come sit down, man. Tell me about Africa. Tell me about Africa. And I thought it's like a trick thing. And they'd say, no, tell me what it looked like, what fruit you eat. They wanted, I felt like Jesus with the elders, like I'm sitting amongst these Rastas, and these Rastas are treating me with a kind of reverence and a dignity because I said I was from Africa. It meant, it was valuable to them. And I'll never, ever forget that. And in many ways, it is Rastafarianism, it is reggae music that changed Jamaican attitudes to blackness, towards Africa, and also the work of people like Michael Manley. My fathers came into Jamaica and started the African Caribbean Institute of Jamaica, brought people like Nyerere, brought people like Kwame Dawes from Ghana to talk about music and art. Cubans came in to do, sun music and so on, to talk about Africa. So something was happening, and at the forefront, at the vanguard of it was this reggae consciousness, this awareness of Africa and this Rasta awareness of Africa. That meant a lot to me, and in fact, it gave me a valid sense of my identity in Jamaica, and a great deal of pride in the fact that I came from a place like Ghana, where these people in Jamaica, we were the same. You could see that. And that meant, even as a child, that meant a tremendous amount to me. So when Bob Marley sings, Natty Dread is 5,000 miles away from home, don't care what the world says, I and I children never go astray, just like a bright and sunny day, we're gonna have things our way. That lyric is a lyric that affirms the sort of African diasporal unity and idea. Marley was never unpopular in Jamaica. Now, Marley was not, I mean, in terms of songs sold in the 70s, he was competing with Jacob Miller, Peter Tosh, Bonnie Whaler, Marcia Griffiths, Augustus Pablo, and a whole slew of DJs like U-Roy, I-Roy, Big Youth, and so on. And they were popular. Ernie Smith was more popular in terms of record sales than Bob Marley, right? I and I, man, Pluto Shervington, right? Must be a dopey or a gunman. I'm gonna find out yet. Full songs, right? One of the biggest hits in Jamaica was called Barnabas Collins. Out your light, lock your door tight. Barnabas a come figure take one bite. It was a dreadful sight when him sight Mr. Right. You should have hear she ball, Jesus Christ, take time, Barney. This is about a vampire. This was a hit, like so hit. So yeah, Marley couldn't compete with that, right? But Jamaicans respected Marley. There's no question about that. Even though people would say, well, when he did Kaya, he was selling out. I think in the larger sense, the musicians and so on and so forth respected Marley. Middle-class Jamaicans did not, because he was a Rasta. He was a Rasta. He was a Rasta. He was the worst kind of Rasta. He's a Rasta who actually had good hair and locks it. This is the worst thing you could do. He had good white man hair, good nice hair, and he locks it like an old African. He had good skin, and him gone to make it look like him is just nothing and worthless. So there was a class thing that really Marley had to contend with, and all reggae artists did. Of course, when he died, which was probably one of his best career moves, the whole thing changed. The whole thing changed. I mean, my mother-in-law, God rest her soul, who I love so dearly, I nearly fell down when one day, 10 years ago, she said, well, Kwame, that Bob Marley, he had some wise things to say. I almost fell out. I said, Mrs. D, you really saying that? Which, in the 70s, she would never have said something like that. But in retrospect, she realized the value of what he did. So, yeah, I think his importance will not diminish because the work is still there. The lyric is still there. People may say Bob Marley's ganja and so on and so forth. You can do it forever, but if you just pay attention to the lyric and just read it or listen to it, you realize that something really, really transcendent has happened in this one artist that cannot be denied, and it's pointless denying it. Yeah. Okay. And they all went silent. Okay, good. I can go on forever, so you have to tell me when to stop. Yeah, go ahead.
I really liked your poem, The Hanging Tree.
Yes.
It evokes some very powerful imagery.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that you've been all over the place. It seems like you've lived in many places, Canada, Jamaica,
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina. And I was wondering how nature or setting influences your poetry. Like, how do you work that in?
Yeah.
I read some of your other stuff too, and I noticed that you use it very well.
Yeah, thank you. No, that's a conscious thing. It's conscious in this sense. I never feel I understand a place until I can name the trees in that place. Until I feel that, and I do it through writing. So one of the things I do is I will read botanical books and so on and so forth and try and see. I'm not, this is not being precocious or cute. I'm not bright or anything. It's just, I'm a poet who pilfers from everything possible, right? So, but I like to make those connections because it helps me to understand the landscape. I remember for years I used to wonder how rain started, how to know when it's going to rain in South Carolina. I didn't know. I knew in Jamaica, I could tell, I could look in the sky, I could say, okay, this is coming, no, it's not going to rain, yes, it's going, I could do it. I understood the sky. I understood the sky, I knew the language. I came to South Carolina and said, it's not going to rain, and then I'll be wet. Like, no, it did rain. So that's not right. So, but eventually I did. I understood the sky. And so I went to Nebraska and I started to read the sky, and it's really nothing, it's just sky. So it's like a lot of it, like just sky. I can't read it. I don't understand it yet, and it will take time. But to me as an artist, I feel I must understand the space that I'm in. And if somebody has to take me on the path to understand it, then that would be necessary too. So it's important to me, and that's why you'll see it emerge in my poems. I remember Ghana because of the trees. I remember Ghana because of the food. It's still, I make those visceral connections with place and memory. They're very important to me. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Is there a question? Yes.
In the class before we read Midland,
Yeah.
one of the other books that we read was by Marlon James.
Yes, I know Marlon, good friend of mine.
That's what I was, do you guys ever, because his next book supposedly is about the assassination attempt on Bob Marley.
Yeah, he's such a rip-off artist, that guy. No, yeah, he's my buddy, I can say that, yeah. But yeah. I mean, who wouldn't do that? That's a great idea, don't you think?
Well, it seems like it's interesting that you sort of focus on like the love, and Marlon James would focus on like the gory details, like the.
Well, he's just a little sick, Marlon is a little sick. He's got issues, you don't go near him on like, dark nights and something like that. I mean, just between me and you, I'm just saying, No, I think what Marlon is daring. He take risks. And he's daring because he the work that he did in trying to get a language for the slave societies, and to make it immediate and pressing so that it's not romanticized, I think is very risky, but I think he does it brilliantly. And it'd be interesting what he does with the Marley story, because the Marley story, I think he's going to come at it with multiple angles. I think he's going to do voices that we don't expect to tell those stories. And I think he's going to focus on women more than the guys, because that's Marlon's. He's always coming at it slant. So I think it's a great idea, though. I think he would be. I mean, and it's gonna sell. I mean, it's like that's a good idea. I wish I had thought about it. But yeah, no, I know Marlon quite well. Marlon was one of the first people. We started workshops in Jamaica through Calabash, and Marlon was one of the first people who took those workshops. And he's really what we call a kind of success story for us, because his work was picked up, and he's become a very, very, very good writer.
Were you there when he did his reading?
Where?
At the Calabash Film Festival?
Of course, I run the festival. What do you mean if I was there? Yes, I was there, and I tried to get him off the stage. That's what I tried to do, because, Marlon goes on stage, and he knows this is Jamaica, and it's pure bad word in his cussing and bad word and slackness and all kinds of things in his reading. And so a woman says, Mr. James, man, there are women and children in the audience. Oh, well, it's an adult event here. You should just come and take it anyway. And Marlon just proceeds to cuss, and then he tries to change it, and then he gets tired of trying, and he just keeps going. So it was decidedly scandalous. But it was a hot session. So at the end of the day, it worked out. But yes, I was there, and I was just, oh, Marlon, don't do that. Not here. But yeah. He probably remembers that differently, but... But the Jamaican audience, it's like 2,000 people in the audience, and people will just talk back at you. It's not like, you people are politely sitting there. They'll say like, read that again, man, read that one again. I never get the last part. Read that part again. They'll just, what's the point? Why you sit down politely and pretend you got it, and then afterwards, you come and say, that was really deep, which means I didn't understand a word you said. But somebody told me you're bright, so that must be really deep, like really deep. No, they'll tell you to stop. No, read that again. Pull up, wheel and come again. Yeah, it's a good festival. Is this being taped? I hate this stuff. I hope it's not being recorded, because I've lied all the way through. These are all lies. I don't know Marlon James. I've never met the guy. And he's going to hear this, and then he's going to write letters and so on. All right, anyway, any other questions? Yes? No? I don't know. Yes? Who? Yeah.
Well, I grew up in Nigeria.
Hey.
Reggae, had a great, profound, positive image on the youth.
Mm-hmm.
And now, living in America, hip-hop or rap is having the same kind of effect. But I dare say it's not having a positive impact on the youth of the world. I mean, you see gangster rap in Pakistan, in Nigeria, all over the world. But the message is not what Marley and that group was doing back in the 70s.
Yeah, for fear, sometimes I try to be really balanced and very careful, because, my son is into hip hop and he's really like a serious student of it. And he's into reggae as well. He's teaching me, things that I would have sort of initially made that kind of assertion, but he would say that's a limited view of what is happening with hip hop. And I think he's right. I met, when I was in South Africa touring, doing an African tour in Southern Africa, and I toured with a hip hop artist from Senegal, and I found out more about the work that they did. And listen, they were changing the political environment. They were getting people to vote. They were creating, and they're still doing that work. And it's on the basis of hip hop. Hip hop became their empowerment, a way to speak the language. And his hip hop is very much a transformation, a kind of hybrid, in a way that Lucky Dubé changed reggae and made reggae, or Majek Fashek changed reggae and made it an African music, and so on. They've made hip hop an African hip hop. So I think there's some positive things that are really positive things that are happening in that process of empowerment. But for me, the parallels are very straightforward. Hip hop is in the generation of what we call dancehall in Jamaica, right? And the truth is, everybody knows that hip hop was invented in Jamaica by Jamaicans, like most good things in the world. That's true, though, right? But what is interesting is hip hop emerges at a very interesting social time. It's in the 1980s, and if you were there at the time, you knew that it wasn't going to last. I mean, nobody thought a hip hop, a hippity hop, don't stop, was going to last. You figured this is going to be like 5 years max, and then we're going to go to something else. Hip hop survived, not only survived, but has thrived. Just to give you a simple example, who watched the Grammys, the last Grammys? How many people watched it? Let me explain something to you about the power of hip hop. Jay-Z, who, by the way, I found out is God. Jay-Z goes on as to pick up a prize. He was like a co-writer in the prize. So he goes up to pick up the prize. Dude who won the prize, like his tune, I forget who it was, gave his speech. The music starts to play. The music is really who God is in the Grammys, right? When the music plays, it means get off the stage. It is like no respecter of person. And I swear, if you saw it, you know what I'm talking about. Jay-Z is standing to the side. dude does his speech, the music starts to play, and Jay-Z does this, and the music stops. The music stops. I looked at my daughter and I said, she looked at me and she said, Daddy, did the music stop? I said, yes. And Echo, the music stopped. She says, the music never stops. I said, no, the music never stops. The music stopped. So that Jay-Z could say, oh, peace out, love you, take care. The music doesn't stop for anybody, but it stopped for Jay-Z. That's power. So, for me, I think there's something positive there. But you know, the music in the 80s is music that you have to associate with crack. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they all use crack, but it's the spirit of crack. It's like, the 70s is marijuana. The 80s is crack. It's like fast, everything speeds up, like really energetically, right? So I think music follows the drugs that are like that are around, right? And there's a kind of nihilism that emerges out of it because it's disillusionment, right? But it's a necessary kind of disillusionment. I think the anger that was expressed and articulated in these songs was necessary. And it was an important confrontation with the world. And even when it was ugly, it was describing the conditions that people were in. And it needed to be recognized as such. So I appreciate it. I mean, to me, Marley, who is a dancehall, great, amazing dancer, I think he's the closest to the spirit of Bob Marley than the rest of the Ziggy or Stevie, even though those guys I admire and I rate them highly. But I think Damian Marley, who doesn't do sort of roots reggae, but does dancehall, is closest to the rebel spirit, the resistant spirit of Bob Marley. Because I suspect that if Bob Marley was born today, he would not be doing roots reggae. He would be doing dancehall, or he would be doing hip hop. That may sound like sacrilege, but I think that's true. Because trust me, reggae was not welcomed as the great savior when it emerged, right? It was ugly, nasty, dirty music. It was ghetto music. So let's still have hope that artists with vision will help to transform the vision of hip hop. And I think there's some there, you know, people, you know, there are many hip hop artists that I think are remarkable and have vision. So I haven't given up yet. Yeah. Yes.
There's actually a good number of us here that are also writers.
Yes.
What would your advice be to emerging writers?
On how to be successful. You know, this may not be the answer you want. But here's the thing. It's hard to reach the place where you will write regardless of what happens. But it's the place to reach for, right? It's the place to reach for. It's that you would write even if people reject the work. You will write even when you feel that you're not writing as well as you should. You will write when everything else is falling apart around you. Because in the business of writing, in the process of writing, in the act of writing, you discover something that is transformative and that has value for you in the very act of doing it. If you reach that stage, then the rest becomes an exercise in improvement, an exercise in committing yourself to that improvement. So here's what I would say then. The analogy I use is simple. I really believe that ideas ideas, great ideas, concepts, thoughts, fascinating stories. I believe those are a dime a dozen. I believe everybody has them. Really, I believe so. I believe somebody has sat down and said, boy, it'd be nice to write a nice novel about the assassination of Bob Marley. Wouldn't that be a great novel? Yes, man, that'd be nice. I believe somebody has said that the day Bob Marley was shot. The difference between the idea and the work that emerges is something called craft. We have ideas. What we struggle with is finding the language to convey, to articulate, and to meet the value, the quality of the idea. But that's craft. So our life, my life as a writer, exists in the space between my ability and my idea. And it's a frustrating space. But the difference between me and the person who is giving up is that I have accepted that space. That I will constantly be in that condition of saying, I'm trying to make my craft meet that. But I persist because I know that my craft, with practice, by reading other work, by writing more, by being tough on myself, by exercising all the skills that I can know, by doing that, by learning more words, by learning how to use images, by learning how to use rhythm, by learning how to scan lines, all of that labor, tedious, can improve my craft. The ideas will take care of themselves. And if I can make my craft finally arrive at the point where it articulates that experience, then I've achieved something valuable. But until you reach the point where, the point I reached was, I decided that I was going to write regardless of what happens, so I better get good at it. Because if I don't, I'll be inflicting a lot of really bad stuff on a lot of people. And I don't want to be that guy. So I'm going to get better at it. And it didn't mean that I was going to take a course or a program. I said, I'm going to have to learn. I'm going to have to read. I'm going to have to see if I can imitate these guys and these women. I'm going to have to see if I can capture the same things that they did and see if I can make my work reach that point. So it's an answer you know. I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
But it's still good to hear.
It's still good to hear, yeah. But that's where you have to reach. The business of this thing, good ideas, where to send work and all that kind of thing, yeah, that's like an email. You know, that's an email. The real work is that you still, in alone, you're sitting there, you're still going to persist with this thing. But you're critical enough of yourself to not get stupid about what you're doing. But you're going to keep working at the craft. Derek Walcott, I interviewed him maybe a few months ago, and he said the most depressing thing I've ever heard. He says, I'm still trying to write that poem that really captures perfectly what I'm reaching for. I'm not there yet. I said, Derek, you're 80 odd years. What do you mean at this stage? You can't tell me it's over. I'm hoping that at least you've got to that point in your head. So this is like permanent. Yeah. That's where we are. Yes. Good. Any more? Did I see? No? You have to wave if your hand is up. If not, then going once, going twice. What's my favorite Bob Marley song? I can't do that. I can't do that. That's not right. That's not a good question. Would you can't ask that. That's not fair. No. You see, it changes, right? I love So Jesse, even though I find that they use the early version of the synthesized drums, the synth drums, but it's a great tune, So just said, not one of my sheep shall sleep in. But really, let me tell you something. That album, Survival, I think that's a beautiful song, beautiful album, first of all. And Forever Loving Jah, I think it's a song that I go back to all the time. Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, you're going to stop me going now, because there could be so many songs that I could talk about. Because, like, Running Away, you know that tune, Running Away? You're running and you're running and you're running away. You see, people don't know that tune. But the great thing about that tune is that he does this dialogue. I3 saying, you're running and you're running. And he says, but you can't run away from yourself. And then when the song ends, he says, no, 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 don't say that. I'm not running. I don't want to. I got to protect my life, but I don't want to live with no strife. It's better to live on the housetop than to live in a house full of confusion. And I made my decision and I left you, and now you're coming to tell me that I'm running away. It's not true. It's not true. It's a great comment, because it's the most vulnerable moment in Bob Marley, because he left Jamaica after being shot. And the I3s are singing, you're running and you're running, as if the Jamaicans are telling him, you're running away, you're running away. And then he answers, but you can't run away from yourself. He says, every man thinketh his burden is the heavy man, but who feels it knows it. And then he starts the appeal. He's pleading with the Jamaicans. Don't say that. Don't say that. I'm not running. I got to protect my life. I don't want to live in no strife. What a moving expression of vulnerability and honesty, and yet a kind of truth that still emerges out of it, that you can't run away from yourself. And people don't know this, because that part of it is almost like it's the tail end of the song. He's almost whispering it, but it's the heart of the song. It's amazing stuff. You know what I'm saying. If you don't like Bob Marley, I mean, I don't know what you're going to do with yourself, right? Yeah, I guess you don't like sex either. I mean, like, what are you going to do? I'm done. See you. Thank you all very much.